In essence, there are only two ways to live your life: by following what you want and by avoiding what you don't. One is driven by passion, the other by fear. You pick the driver. From Angel's Notebook of Irrelevant Relevance. I feel sleepless tonight. For whatever reason, my thoughts seem to wander into various unrelated to each other corners of my memory. Nothing troubles me in particular, but somehow I'm feeling restless. I keep tossing and turning in my bed, unable to find that sweet, restful spot where I can relax and drift off. Yet I don't feel like getting up either. It's still dark outside, but I'm trying not to look at the clock. Otherwise, my mind, like many times before, will start counting down the time left before the alarm goes off, and any hope of falling asleep will then go down the drain. I can't see anything through the blinds except the dark gray October sky. I closed my eyes again, hoping to finally fall asleep, when I thought I heard a sound, or more like a very soft rustle, or perhaps a swoosh as if by a bird's wing or by a moving silky gown. Before I could identify the origin of the sound, the entire bedroom suddenly lit up as if someone turned on a nightlight located somewhere behind my head. I felt shivers in my body, yet I wasn't frightened. I had a very strange feeling that I was completely safe, even though a weird light of unknown origin in your bedroom in the middle of the night is in and by itself not something you would call a comforting experience. In a moment, I sensed a distinct presence of another being. Strangely still, it wasn't frightening, but instead felt like someone very familiar, like a family member or a very close friend, entered the room. I turned around. Behind my shoulder, sitting on the edge of my nightstand, was an angel. A typical angel, dressed in white, with the wings peacefully folded behind his back, as typical as you would expect an angel to be. He also seemed very cozy and homelike, for lack of a better word. Either way, it didn't surprise me, although, perhaps, that's the way angels are meant to be. There was an iconic halo around his head, as well as a distinct aura surrounding the rest of the body. Again, as you would expect from an angel. I am not sure if angels have gender, but this one appeared to be a male, around 55 years of age, about 6 foot tall. He had longer hair, slicked back with a hint of gray around the temples. He looked like a very intelligent and very kind literature professor. There was also a touch of nobility in the way he carried himself. His face remained solemn, although his eyes gave away a hint of a smile as he was silently looking at me. Then, out of nowhere, and as if out of thin air, materialized another figure, of what I later identified as another angel. This one appeared to be a woman in her mid to late 30s, about 5'3", 5'4", average build with shoulder-length blonde hair. She was very attractive, but not in that in-your-face trashy sort of way. Her beauty was of a more subtle, more inconspicuous and heartwarming nature. She moved with the fluid and effortless grace of a cat. It looked as if she stepped right out of the wall and now stood behind the man as she put her hand on his shoulder. What? Who are you? I heard myself ask, although I immediately felt like I already knew the answer. The man and the woman exchanged quick glances and smiled. You guessed it. We are your guardian angels, said the man. I had a strange sensation. It seemed as if his voice wasn't coming from outside, but rather from inside me. For a few seconds, we continued to look at each other without making a sound. And why are you here? I finally asked. We are always here, the woman replied. That's our mission. The tone and the timbre of her voice were mesmerizing, even hypnotic. I felt enveloped in an unusual sensation of warmth and peacefulness. But I don't think I called for your help. I sat up in my bed. I always thought angels only show up when you call on them or when you are in danger. Am I in danger? No, she shook her head. Sometimes we just show up. Before she could say another word, the man gently touched her forearm. She looked at him and stopped with a coy, somewhat sheepish smile. You see, he started, there are moments in your life, some key moments when it's time for you to take on a new step, move to a new level. It's like you outgrow your old clothes, old shoes, old relationships. They are still very comfortable and cozy, but you are beginning to feel like you have outgrown them. He was speaking in a soothing baritone, lowering his pitch at the end of each sentence into a deep and velvety Leonard Cohen-style growl. And I guess this is one of those moments for me, I said. Yes, it is, he grinned. So now what? Now we would like to take you for a little walk. A walk? Now? Are you kidding? In the middle of the night? The woman laughed. The sound of her soft, yet bright and crisp laughter, like a glockenspiel, echoed through my entire body, yet my ears did not register any sound at all. Still, her laughter made me feel relaxed and at peace, like a cup of warm and soothing tea. Don't worry, we're not going to disturb your neighbors, she said softly. It won't be outside. It will be an internal one. Internal one? What do you mean? Internal means inside your inner world, your mind, your thoughts, and your feelings. Inside the inner space of your images and memories, she explained. We stared at each other for a few moments. Me, with curiosity mixed with a bit of doubt. They, with a warm, soothing smile. I felt that my initial awkwardness and tension started to melt away. Finally, I pointed at their wings. I have always wondered whether angels actually needed them or not. So, do you really use these to fly? Angels burst into laughter. We knew this was going to come up sooner or later, giggled the woman. Seriously though, no, we do not need the wings to move around, she explained. It's just that we often choose to appear to humans in the way many of you expect us to look. But now that you know it, I think we can drop the masquerade, half-jokingly said the man, and a moment later the wings of both angels faded away. Do angels have names? I was getting curious. Angels glanced at each other and the man nodded his head. We do. A lot, in fact. Usually, at least one for each lifetime. You too, by the way. In my most recent life, my name was Daniel. Hers, he nodded at the woman, was Gabriella. Daniel was a professor of social psychology at the University of Cologne, Germany. the woman chimed in. And as for me, she looked at the man with a playful smile as if asking for his permission for what she was about to do. "Wanna take a guess?" He played along. I glanced at her, trying to read into the warmth of her looks, poised demeanor, and graceful physique. "A dancer?" "Not quite, but close," she shook her head. "A teacher?" "In some regards, yes." "Okay, I give up." I shrugged my shoulders. Before I knew it, in one swift motion, Gabriella leapt 3 feet into the air and landed into a very deep horse stance. After a series of lightning-fast air punches, she exploded into a spin and delivered, one after another, a flurry of the most perfect roundhouse and spinning back kick sequences I had ever seen. I could hear the swoosh as she was cutting through the air with her feet and making a thorough mess out of an invisible enemy. I flinched and instinctively pulled back, not knowing what to make of it. But Daniel seemed to be enjoying the show. "What the heck?" I slowly gathered my composure. "Who is she?" "Gabby is a kung fu teacher and a black belt. She was a South American champion several times. She spent a few years in Shaolin studying leopard style. Later, she taught it all across North and South America." "But you were close," said Gabriella. "When I was young, I did indeed work as a dancer for a while in my native Buenos Aires. Martial arts came along later." It was a dark and chilly night at the very end of October. The sky was covered with clouds, no moon, no stars. Yet my room was illuminated by the strange glow that radiated from my unexpected midnight visitors. "Okay," Daniel broke the silence. "Time to go. We have places to visit and things to do before the sunrise. Ready?" I shrugged my shoulders, still not fully understanding what all this was about and why I needed it. "Trust us," said Gabriella. "We have been with you since the day you were born. Helping you is our role and our mission." She reached out and touched my wrist. Her fingers were slender and warm. A second later, I was overcome by an indescribable sensation of infinite peace and love. It was more intense than anything I had ever experienced before. Yet it felt oddly familiar. "Okay, let's go," I nodded. Gabriella got up and stood behind me. Then she put one hand on my forehead and touched the top of my head with her other hand. I felt a slightly prickly sensation like static running through my hair. Then it seemed like a silent explosion inside my head. After that, I felt as if a cloud of golden glittering sparkles descended upon my head and shoulders and gradually enveloped my entire body. For a few more seconds, I was suspended in that blissful state, peaceful and completely thought-free. Eventually, I opened my eyes. Or so I thought. In that very moment, I realized that I no longer felt any gravity, in that my body seemed weightless. I looked around. Angels were still there, but my bedroom, my bed, my chair, and the nightstand started to look blurry, as if they were behind a semi-transparent veil or curtain of sorts. They now seemed like paintings on the wall that were gradually fading into nothingness. This state felt very strange and at the same time inexplicably familiar. I couldn't tell exactly where and when I had experienced this before, but I had a distinct feeling that I had. And then I flew. It wasn't a flight in a conventional, earthly kind of sense. I wasn't flapping or swinging my arms, and still I was flying, or perhaps more accurately, gliding through the air. It seemed like all I was doing is changing the direction of my thought, and that moved me in the direction that I wanted. I looked at the top of the old cedar tree in my backyard, and in that instant, I found myself hovering 5 feet away from it. One glance at the roof of my neighbor's house, and the next moment I was there. This feeling was indescribable. Despite the chilly midnight air, my skin did not feel any cold. I was aware of the wind and the chill, yet I was completely content. I looked around again. Suddenly, I was enthralled by a playful, mischievous feeling of a 10-year-old boy who just got a new flashlight as a gift and is getting into every dark spot in the house just to see how it works. About 50 feet below me, I noticed my neighbor's old Cadillac. It has been rusting away on their driveway for 7 or 8 years. I thought. I have always wondered what it looks like on the inside. In an instant, I was on the front seat of the old vehicle. I reached to grab the gear stick when I all of a sudden had a very strange sensation. I felt the smoothness and firmness of the ivory knob, yet the feeling wasn't in my fingertips. It was somewhere inside me, as if I was a part of the vehicle and it was a part of me. That's exactly right, I heard Gabriella's melodic laughter. We are all one. I looked at her shocked, not quite understanding how she could possibly hear my thoughts that I hadn't even finished thinking. The meaning of what she said escaped me altogether, and it wasn't until much later when I was able to grasp the notion as well as the depth of it. Daniel and Gabriella were hovering in the air not too far away, smiling like a pair of loving parents watching their toddler play with his toys in the backyard sandbox. "All right," finally said Daniel. "Time to go." Funny thing, he seemed to say it very quietly. Still, despite a significant distance between us, I was able to hear it very clearly, as if the source of the sound was right inside my head. I waved goodbye to the old junker and followed the angels. Hovering at about 30 feet above the ground, in the middle of my street, Daniel stretched his arm upwards and closed his eyes, focusing. Gabriella took my hand and extended her other arm towards the sky just like Daniel did. In a fraction of a second, 2 powerful beams of light exploded from their fingertips, forming a sort of a tunnel above our heads. An incredible force burned a hole in the middle of the blanket of dark gray clouds and catapulted us into the tunnel with an enormous speed and power. For what seemed like a second, I lost the sense of where I was and who I was, and the last thing I saw was a blast of incredibly bright white light. When I found myself back in my room, I noticed a small faded blue notepad on my nightstand, exactly where Daniel had been sitting when I first met my angels that night. There was a handwriting on the front page saying, "Angel's Notebook of Irrelevant Relevance." I immediately knew where it came from. What I did not know is that this was the first of what would later become a sequence of experiences that I will refer to as Walks with an Angel, a series of unique adventures, discoveries, and insights into the very nature of who we are.